Okay, welcome everybody. Stephen Shelley with,
Teresa Scova.
I don't know why we still do that. Old habits die hard. But in case you're new, now you know who the hell we are. But we're really excited to be with you today. This is our third installment of our new conversation series that we call The Shift. And it's really conversations about a new earth and about a new society that's forming. And today we're really, really excited and very honored to welcome our dear friend and guest, Ronnie Landis. Ronnie, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Super excited to be here, ready to dive deep with you guys.
Yes,
Awesome.
Deep it shall be.
Awesome. We're ready to go.
We should maybe first just kind of like, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Ronnie. I think you may have seen our little video about this, but we talked about the incredible way that we connected with you initially was at the Chocolate Tree in Sedona. I think you're in Sedona
Yep,
now.
that's right.
And how we kind of run into you. Like I ran into you at the Chocolate Tree. Darn it, we should have driven to Sedona to do this interview.
Oh man, that would have been so much better.
That's what we should have done. Although they may be closed. But anyway, but yes, where we kind of had these amazing chance kind of rendezvous with you over the years, which kind of thinking about a new society and a way that kind of people ought to come together. It's really kind of, that seems to be a theme, you know, where there's this kind of coming together that just happens naturally based on vibration and intention and things like that. So that's kind of a nice kind of prelude. So just to kind of get things started, I'll throw it to you. And we'd love to kind of hear the little snapshot portrait of who you are, what you've done, and then kind of what you're focused on now, and then we'll dive into our list.
Okay, cool. Well, that could go in a lot of different directions. I'll try to keep it concise. So for the last 11 years or so, I've been a professional nutritionist, a holistic health practitioner, extremely versed in all areas of health, wellness, nutrition, healing, detoxification, restoration of the human body, longevity, and peak performance. And so these are all the things that I've been extremely interested in, as well as psychology, in implementing and integrating all these different themes into a model for human potential focused on health as the primary focus. So, you know, it's been a long journey. I've traveled around the country and around the world, giving hundreds of lectures, you know, creating a lot of online educational programs. I've published multiple books and have a podcast and YouTube channel and all that great stuff on the internet that people can check out. So really what I am is a human potential specialist with a focus on nutrition and health as the main pillar for what that looks like. And I've been really championing that message of food and holistic health for all this time. And, you know, we could go a lot deeper into that. That's obviously one of the main things that we want to talk about in this conversation, and building immunity, what I call immunological protection, and building immunological momentum, and really understanding what the immune system is, because most people out there are just totally confused. They're getting all this deciphered, or I should say this distillation of information coming from all these different talking heads, these pundits, these different angles. And quite honestly, what I see is a mass amount of confusion and really an absence of clarity, right? And so what we want to do is kind of demystify a lot of the confusion, the complications, and I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of different things. So I'll just leave it there for the audience. You can certainly, if this resonates with you, you can certainly check out any of the other stuff I do, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, the immune system thing is really important. I want to talk to you about that. We have that in our list because there's this promoted, and this can kind of be a nice little segue into our first question, but there's this sense out there that this thing, coronavirus, God forbid you come in contact with it, because no matter what you have inside of you, an immune system or not, you're in trouble. And
You're right.
so we want to really untangle that and maybe free people of that kind of fear or illusion, because the immune system is extraordinary when supported in a way that I think you'll describe beautifully for us.
Yeah, let's talk about like what this virus is and what is the real risk to a healthy person? Like, why are people getting sick from this? Because I have friends now who are so bought into the media, and that could take us down. We'll go down those holes, I'm sure here, but that like they won't leave their house again or get together with a group of people until there's a vaccine, which I find to be the most terrifying thing. But obviously that's the program that's being played now for people, right? That's the intent of this whole thing. So let's talk first about like, what is the coronavirus and what is people's real risk here?
Yeah, well, first thing is to understand, you said the word program. So if you want to understand what a virus is, the idea of a virus is actually a program. So a virus is not the same as a bacteria or a parasite or a fungi like Candida, for example. They all get lumped into this category called pathogens. And we're having to actually change our entire perspective of virology. So that's the scientific study of viruses, which I actually believe is completely based on misinformation, based on the real doctors and the real not psychologists, but the real scientists that are actually coming forth from all different angles that are basically telling people what we're being told by the media is not showing up in are real life examples. Like even doctors that are not alternative doctors, that are in the hospitals, and they're dealing with people that have the so-called COVID-19 virus. They're coming through on many different media channels. All the information's out there, so I don't need to like regurgitate all of it. But basically, there's a lot of people coming forth saying that we've never seen this before, and this is not acting like a normal virus. That it's a strange phenomenon. There's things with pneumonia, things with oxygen respiration depletion, meaning the depletion of oxygen, which also has brought in this whole conversation around 5G and what is that, and is there a connection between 5G, military technology, and this coronavirus. There's a lot of different ideas coming out, and what we're finding out just on that topic, what is a virus? What is this coronavirus? First of all, corona is a strain of viruses that's been with humanity for whoever knows how long, for forever, as far as we're concerned. COVID-19 is its own thing. So that's the important thing to understand. And I'm gonna have to take my breath here just to get through some of the information, because there's literally so much conflicting information. I don't want to go all over the place, and I only want to present what I think is valuable in this conversation, because you can go down the bottomless rabbit hole. There's so much stuff out there on the internet by people that are on the front lines researching this, documenting it, and presenting their findings, their case of findings. COVID-19 is not necessarily the same as what we know as the corona strain of viruses. It's being lumped up together. My personal opinion and perspective based on the evidence is that COVID-19 is actually it's a man-made virus. So that's the first thing to understand. This is not a natural strain by nature. I don't believe in the story that this came from some bat in Wuhan, China. I've studied this. I've turned this thing upside down. I've investigated this. It is very likely, and in my mind, it's a flat out fact that this was created in a laboratory, either in Wuhan, China, or delivered to Wuhan, China, by whatever source. And again, I'm not going to get into that. And this is not conspiracy theory. This is just a flat out conspiracy. One thing I can say about this, without going down the rabbit hole, is that we are not being told the truth from the mainstream media, for sure. Most of them don't even know. They're getting their information 7 levels deep. Right. So when we're getting this kind of fragmented soundbite information from the media pundits, we have to understand that they don't even know what's going on. Right. So there's just a lot of confusion out there. And I'm gonna circle back around to your original question, which is like, what is the risk? Well, that just depends on if you think this thing is real or not. That's the first thing I want to put out there. So let me just say that again. Your risk, in my opinion, depends on how real you perceive this virus to be. Now, I'm not going to say that I think the virus itself is fake. There is a real virus out there. What I do want to say, though, is my report of findings is that it is man-made, and in point in case is that it has a what do you call it? It has a geez, why is the word slipping my mind? When a virus or something is geez, what's the word? It's crazy. It's when you own a patent. Geez, talk about a skipping brain fart there. It has a patent on it, right? So what does that mean? Well, in order to patent something like a pharmaceutical drug, you have to synthesize it. That's what pharmaceuticals do, right? They synthesize a plant, particularly from nature, and they synthesize a compound on it to create a patent on it. So they can legally own that compound and then present it as some kind of concentrated, synthesized pharmaceutical drug. Well, that's exactly what this appears to be. By the way, AIDS, Ebola, the Zika virus, many others as well also have patents on it too. So this is something most people don't realize. If something has a patent on it, that means it's man-made. And I think I can even just leave it at that without going too deep into the conspiratorial rabbit hole. And we can open that up a little bit more if we want, if it's necessary, it's relevant. But just point in fact, the risk of it, that's an interesting conversation, and it's not an easily answerable thing. One of the things I will say about that, what we do know is that the statistics are very questionable. At best, the statistics that we've been getting, it's a moving target. If you've noticed, it keeps changing every other day from when it first started. The original idea was that, oh, this is no big deal. Dr. Fauci and all these other characters, they're like, this is no big deal. You don't have to worry about it. And then a week later, 2 weeks later, March 9th or March 11th, we're like now going into lockdown, right? That's a pretty quick turnaround. So you can see how quickly this has changed, and it's changed our entire life. And so that in of itself should tell you that nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody really knows. So I just want to get grounded here for a second and complete this train of thought, because there's literally so much information pulling through here, and I don't want to confuse anybody. But one thing I will say that we do know for a fact, and you can look this up and it is verifiable, that statistics are being altered, and the certificates, the death certificates, are being altered, whether it is by mistake, which I don't buy into it. I don't think any of this is a mistake, or it's on purpose. Right? We know for a fact that the majority of people that have been claimed to have died by COVID-19 had pre-existing illnesses, and that most of them, and this isn't me saying this isn't my opinion, these are doctors and nurses that are showing up on YouTube, showing up on social media, actually saying that these people that they're treating had pre-existing illnesses, and when they go back over to check the death certificate, it's been changed to corona, right? That's what it says, but there's no evidence that that's actually what killed the person. And I can go deeper into that just when we talk about the immune system, when we talk about viruses themselves, because our entire understanding of what a virus is has to be completely retooled. Remember, I said a virus is not the same as a bacteria, for example. A bacteria is living. It's a living organism. Now, the conventional idea around viruses and this may or may not be true, is that a virus is an organism, a microscopic, nano-sized organism that inserts itself into the machinery of the cell, the nucleus in particular, the reproductive portion of the cell, and it retools the information so it can replicate itself, right? We know that when we study things like cancer. There's a viral component, there's a fungal component usually, sometimes there's a hormonally driven component to different forms of cancer. So that does appear to be part of the equation. However, there's a lot of new information coming out that viruses are actually dead. Viruses are not actually living organisms. They're the byproduct or the excretion of living cells based on a detoxification process. And so when you're tested for something, you may have something in your system, but the question is that a bad thing or not? And I think this is the perspective that we all need to start adopting here, which is, it's the same thing when you deal with detoxification and cleansing, right? When somebody's going through something it's called a Herxheimer syndrome in naturopathic medicine. And what that is a healing crisis. So when you're going through a detoxification process, sometimes the symptoms get worse before they get better. Like if you have the flu, if you have a cold, most people their knee-jerk reaction is so built into fear that if anything is going awry, they have a scratchy throat or they have a cough or they have elevation of their body temperature, they have night sweats or something, immediately they'll run to the doctor. But the symptom is not the root cause, as we know. We have to get out of this like pharmaceuticalized consciousness, which is a pill for every ill. Better living through chemistry. We're just going to band-aid this thing based on the symptom, but we're not going to dig deeper and actually look at the catalyst. What is the cause? What actually is the thing creating the flushing effect, creating the symptom that we see? And I could go, indefinitely on that in any different like condition you want to go to. But I just want to point out I just want to make the point is that there are new perspectives being presented by incredible, like for example, Dr. Shiva, who's the MIT, specialist, just incredible doctor, bringing incredible information out to the public, helping to reorient people's mind to the reality of the situation. Many other incredible doctors and scientists as well are all alluding to this fact that, our idea of virology needs to be retooled. We don't even necessarily know what a virus is, and I'm driving this point so much because there is an agenda associated with this. If you look at the statistics, and I don't need to go through it because everybody has kind of seen the memes on Facebook and everything like that, when we compare it to all these other different, for example, like cancer, what are the rates of cancer? I don't have it on the top of my head, but the second leading cause of death in the world is all cancers combined. The number one leading cause of death in the world is heart disease. The number third, get this, the number third leading death in the world is something called iatrogenics. And what is iatrogenics?
It's the hospital.
What's an iatrogenic disease? Even calling it a disease is ridiculous, but an iatrogenic condition is defined as a drug or doctor-induced death, medical malpractice, or a pharmaceutically induced death. So when we look at cancers, for example, one of the things that came out many, many years ago was this realization that most people that die of cancer don't actually die of the cancer itself. They die of the chemotherapy or the radiation. That's what accelerates the process towards death. It's not actually necessarily the cancer itself. And this will also have to move us into a conversation around psychoneuroimmunology, which is the connection between our psychology and our immune system. When we get a little bit deeper into that, I want to definitely go into that, because underneath all of this, there's layered agendas, which amazingly enough are coming to the forefront, which amazingly enough is like, it's like a flushing effect of the consciousness on the planet. It's like everything is being flushed up all at once. And that's why it can be so confusing and so overwhelming to kind of navigate through a lot of this. And you mentioned, Teresa, you mentioned, you know, some of your friends are kind of just like, all right, well, we're going to do the ostrich thing. We're just going to dig our head into the sand, and we're just going to wait it out here until they have a vaccine, and then we're going to do that, right? What that is, that's a how do you want to say it? That's a what's the word? It's a disassociation effect. It's a psychological disassociation from the truth, and the truth is uncomfortable. You know, we don't necessarily want to admit to ourselves that we've been lied, we've been deceived, that the people in power don't necessarily have our best interests in mind. And that doesn't mean that everybody in power is a liar, but it does mean that our entire social structure and the way that our civilization has been structured, and our economic system, the banking institutions, the definitely the medical system, on and on and on, has been influenced by power brokers that have their own agenda for humanity. That much has to be understood, and I don't think consciousness is going to get left at the door at this point. So for all those people that are kind of just like turning a blind eye, and they're just taking in the media magic trick that's going on, and I have empathy and compassion for those people. I certainly don't want to make fun of any of those people or insult them, but I do need to make the point that is a subtle form of mind control. It is a spell in what's called the dream spell, what we sometimes call the dream spell, i.e. the matrix, right? Our shared consensus of reality, all that's getting shaken up. And so now really what we're left with is a lot of different questions, a lot of different question marks, and we're all trying to arrive at some semblance of the truth. But when it comes to this whole virus thing, my personal opinion and my perspective is that it's not about a virus. However, speaking about the virus, if you are concerned about a virus, that's also what we're here to talk about, is how to never, ever worry about getting sick ever again. I've driven this point for at least 10 years in my work. And it doesn't all of a sudden go out the window because we have this perception of a pandemic, right? This perception of a crisis. The perception of the crisis is more of a crisis on the immune system than any kind of pathogen that may or may not be in our environment.
Yeah, so one thing you hinted at, I just want to be clear about this.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a couple follow-up questions. One is a virus. So is this something you can get by opening a door and going in that somebody else touched?
No.
So
that's complete. That is a flat out lie.
Okay.
You don't know that. Okay. So just real quick on that point, because, you know, I go to Whole Foods and they got the whole screen up and everyone's got the masks on. Those masks, by the way, are not designed. They're only there to keep what's coming out of your mouth and to keep it in. So that's
right.
Actually not necessarily, but it's not helpful. It doesn't really do anything. And for the people wearing the masks, what it does psychologically is it puts you in this weird kind of, I kind of want to use the word sheeple zone, but it's not meant to be an insult. It means that you're going along with the program. You're being herded. You're literally being herded. Now, I understand if you work in certain service-based occupations right now, you don't have a choice. And I get that. And I totally understand that. It's not like you necessarily want to be wearing it, but when you see people in these grocery stores or whatever, and you can feel the fear. I don't know anyone that's wearing that is not conveying an energetic of fear and phobia, right? That's just one thing right there. And, you know, it's possible that your blood oxygen levels are being reduced by wearing that over your face and your nose and your mouth, and not getting the full respiratory, function that you would when you're just breathing air, right?
Right.
So I think I kind of went on a little tangent there.
So okay, so a virus. So what we're trying to get at it is that so a virus is an effect of it comes out of a cellular action. Something happens cellularly, and then there's this kind of, what's the word you use, like an offshoot or create from that.
It's like an excretion.
An excretion.
So, and by the way, I just want to preface this by saying this is the emerging perspective that's arising. I'm not saying that I know for sure, because I'm still I still am presenting, these are two different ideas, and they may be different based on different viral strains or viruses. I'm not entirely clear yet. So I just want to preface that right now. I'm not like the authority on this. I've been studying pathogens and parasites and these type of organisms for a long, long time. And we do know that there is an association with viruses in things like different forms of cancer. So what I'm starting to feel like, okay, is maybe it's not the virus as an active agent itself that's causing the issue. Maybe the virus is a protein molecule that is detected in the process of that particular condition. So like, for example, of a cancer, there's different components that are all happening all at the same time. So maybe when they're testing, for example, it's showing up. So this brings up a good point about this whole corona thing. We know that the tests are faulty. Like, we don't even know if these tests are mean anything. I've heard different people out there that say that people are getting the virus from the test itself. Have you heard that? So
yeah. In fact, if you look at the label, so we have a friend who is a former podcast guest too. Her name's Pam Popper, Dr. Pam Popper. She has a popular YouTube channel, and she's talking a lot about this. She went through the contingencies on one of the tests, and basically the tests, if you look at the fine print, abdicate themselves of even needing to be remotely accurate. And it's astonishing. So the testing numbers are like, who knows? The death count, whatever that means, who knows? But what's interesting is, like, my friend Russell here is also commenting on my nails. This is life with a 3-year-old. But it mentions, like, people are dying. I mean, like, we have friends that we know who are apparently dying from COVID-19. I have a very dear friend, maybe my closest friend, who's in Brooklyn, and who for about a week to 10 days was like, couldn't move and was in such pain. But what was interesting was it wasn't respiratory. He was having headaches and stomach aches.
But people in New York do feel like people are dying around them. Like, for sure, when you talk to people in New York, it feels like people are really dying. But the question is, like, what are they dying from?
Yeah,
right?
what is this? Would this have just? I mean, the other interesting thing, and I'll let you talk, is that if you look at the numbers of deaths from pneumonia, flu, diabetes, other things, are suddenly way down. So, you know, somebody posted the other day, we found the cure for cancer, heart disease, diabetes, influenza, all these other things. It's the coronavirus. So,
right.
That was a funny way to put it. But I mean, underneath all this, something seems to be happening, or is it?
Yeah, no, and I don't have the answer to that. I have my own questions, and I have different information that I've looked at. One of the things that I thought was incredibly astonishing was I kept hearing from people that, you know, this whole thing's a hoax and it's not even real. And I was like, okay, like I get that, like that may be true, but it does appear that things are taking place. People are being affected. I see on social media, some people are like, no, but I know that this person I know has this, or my wife works in the ER. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, that's interesting. But then I talked to one of my friends over here that just came from LA, and I was like, what's going on in LA? And he's like, nothing. I was like, what do you mean nothing? He's like, there's nothing going on. I was like, well, what's going on in the hospital? He's like, there's nothing going on in the hospital. I just went there and it's empty. I was like, and then I was like, okay, this is interesting. I talked to my mom, who's in a different part of California. She basically said the same thing. It's like, there's nothing going on. It's totally empty. And then I go on YouTube and I see this video, which is a compilation of all these different people from around the country on March 28th was the date that all this was put together. And every one of them was going into the hospital. It's like dead silent. They're talking to the emergency dispatch drivers. They don't know what's going on. They're just clueless. And I was like, okay, this is very strange, because we're being told that there's like this massive influx in the hospitals. The hospitals are being overwhelmed by all these people. We need ships. We need basketball stadiums filled up with hospital beds and all this stuff. Now, again, I'm prefacing, I don't know which is which. All I know is I'm getting one story over here, which is the doom and gloom. It's all this is massive pandemic. All these people are dying, right? You're getting that story. But then I'm talking to real people and seeing real people on YouTube, and they're like, I don't know, like there's nothing, we don't see all these overrun hospitals. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in this weird middle place of trying to figure out, okay, what is the truth? I definitely don't think that the virus is a hoax. I don't think it's fake. I think it is a real, this is what I think, and this is what I've heard. I'll just tell you what I personally think. Take it or leave it. Do your own research. I definitely believe that this is a bioweapon. This is not the first time this has happened. We've had biological warfare, Agent Orange, Chernobyl, with nuclear detonations, radiation. These things, as one example, Agent Orange is, I mean, just look that up. That was a complete disaster. I would say chemtrails, for example, and whether you believe in that or not, I definitely do. And to me, it's fact. There's evidence for it. And that's a whole different subject. But that's a form of biological warfare. So this isn't, first thing we need to wrap our head around is that this is not like a new thing. This kind of idea has been going on, and you could derive your own theories and stuff. But my feeling is that this is a biological weapon that has a very, very low lethality. And what that means is that either by mistake or by design for some different agenda, which we're now kind of seeing is being rolled out with this whole vaccination agenda, that whole thing that we've been theorizing for a long time is finally making its way to the surface. Thank God it's being completely shut down and opposed by the Trump administration and the new Surgeon General that they put in there, and replaced the old guy who was clearly in bed with the pharmaceutical company and had nothing to do with the best interests of the people. That's an interesting turnaround of events. People, literally hundreds of millions even of people that are making their voice and their opinion and their stance known on the internet, whether that's like trolling Bill Gates's whatever your opinions of him or whatever that is, like they're all completely avalanching over on any agenda to push this thing through. But the point of the matter is that we're seeing what those potential agendas are. So back to this whole thing with the potential virus. It appears to me that it is a bioweapon. It had a particular intention, but the lethality of it is very, very, very low, right? Which is a good thing. Which is amazing. And so this brings it back, Teresa, to your original question, which is like, what is the risk? I personally, this is my personal opinion. People may not agree with this. My personal feeling is that there is no risk, because the contagion doesn't exist. This is not, you can't, and especially if viruses are actually just excretions of a detoxification process, they're called exosomes. So you can look into that. That's what it's actually, at least that's the idea, right? This new kind of emerging idea that we're seeing. If that's the case, there is no contagion. And by the way, just to validate that point, because some people will be like, what is he talking about? You're just talking nonsense. Well, look, you have something called a microbiome. And apparently you have something called a microbiome, right? Which is the viral equivalent of our microbiome. I think it's all just the same thing. I don't think we need to separate it. It's all part of your immune system. Your skin, so your microbiome is your internal garden. It's your internal ecosystem, which has viruses and has bacterial organisms and fungi. You have candida in your body. It's a natural part of your ecosystem. But when the candida overgrows in the intestinal tract, it's recycling undigestible debris as a recycling mechanism. You have parasites in your body of some form or another. They're all recycling organisms, and when they get fed what our cells don't respire on, what our, like when the cells lose oxygenation or electrons, and you have this excess of sugar combined with fat and these improper food combinations, then the candida starts to grow because it's actually trying to protect you. But it creates all these other symptoms and issues, right? So what's important to understand, and we have this will have to get into a conversation of like terrain versus germ theory. Obviously, that's being put out there. I've been studying that for about 10 years. I can talk more about that, but to the point, your microbiome is actually what protects you. So your skin, for example, is covered ideally, unless you sanitize yourself, which is, again, part of the consciousness of our pharmaceutical allopathic model, which is you got to sanitize everything, you got to antibioticize it, you got to vaccinate it, you got to cut, burn, poison, kill everything. But these things that we're trying to kill are actually part of a symbiotic ecosystem that makes up our body, really, right? So we got to get that awareness. And if we don't get that awareness, we're going to be living in fear of these invisible critters that are somehow out to get us. The whole thing is just a little ludicrous when you start to break it down. But that's kind of what we're dealing with. So you're this idea of you're going to transmit some virus to somebody else, your body and your immune system and your microbiome are so much more sophisticated than that. And I personally, like, I shake hands, I hug people, not everybody's open to that right now. And I totally respect that. I'm just, let everyone have their space. But all my friends and everything, we're just fine.
Yeah. Let's talk about that before we get into like the kind of like, why is this happening on the kind of bioweapon thread, what are the forces happening, all that. Like, let's talk about terrain versus germ theory really quick, because for people who don't understand that, because we've obviously been programmed in this Western medicine allopathic society to believe that like we're going to get something and we have to get rid of that something, versus like why do people actually get sick, and why would a healthy body not get sick from a virus? And if people were dying after they got a virus, they're not really dying from a virus, or they're not really like getting sick because of a virus. Like, why are they getting sick? What's going on? What's the terrain theory?
That's such a great question. And nobody dies of a virus. Nobody dies of a bacterial infection. Nobody dies of a parasite infection. What somebody is dying from is the reason why you have the infection in the first place. There's a complete adjustment to our simplistic, model on disease and all this kind of stuff I've been riffing about, right? Yeah. So the only reason somebody gets sick is because they have an immunological compromise. Their immune system has been compromised. That's the only reason you'll ever get sick. That's the only reason you have chronic inflammation, anything of that nature. So that first understanding is critical. Now, nobody in the mainstream media is really being told about how to actually empower your immune system. They're just pushing this whole, like, we need a vaccination. Like last time I checked, Bill Gates couldn't even cure a virus on Windows. And all of a sudden he's going to be the speaking head for, he's the medical expert apparently on virology and immunity. So just a little background on this. So the germ theory was propagated by Louis Pasteur, who is responsible for pasteurization. So pasteurizing dairy products, for example. Before that, we had raw dairy, like just the way that it's always been, just raw, unprocessed, unadulterated dairy products, just, you know, from the land, from the animal itself. That's the way it always was. Nobody had any of these issues or problems before, as far as I can tell. But then it's hard to stabilize. You can't shelf stabilize those products for mass distribution without a pasteurization process, because they're living, right? This whole thing is a paradigm of life versus death. That's really what it comes down to. You know, from a materialistic kind of mechanistic perspective, it's like atheism versus faith, for example. That's how I see the whole scientific model right now. The scientific war for information is it actually does have its part to play in this grander kind of perspective around, and I don't mean religion, obviously, I mean faith. You know, the faith that we're not here alone on the planet. There is a divine force. There is kind of like this, you know, whatever, light and dark, whatever you want to call it. There are forces outside of us that do exist, that are kind of guiding us towards our ultimate destiny as a humanity. And that has its part to play in this whole conversation. But just going back, so the pasteurization thing, again, it's really just a way to antibioticize naturally occurring bacteria that naturally occurs in milk products. It naturally occurs on your raw plant food, just as a byproduct of the soil, right? It naturally occurs in spring water. So processing and pasteurizing water, which most people, I don't know very many people who have not been raised on tap water, for example, or at very best, some kind of processed, purified, filtered water that still comes from the tap, right? So just breaking that down, that whole idea comes from this aversion to microbes without understanding. Now we understand, maybe back then we didn't understand this, but now we understand again that we are living, or what's living inside of us is a symbiotic colony of microorganisms and microbes that actually fundamentally build our immune system. 80 to 90% of our immunological function is predicated on these organisms in our microbiome. And that's why probiotics and prebiotics, and even to that extent, enzymes are so popular now. Fermented, fermented yogurts, kefirs, coconut kefirs, all these kind of things are popularized in our culture, but a lot of people still don't know that, don't kind of know where this came from. So anyways, I know I'm riffing here, but I'm going to just get to the point. So germ theory, that's just a little background on the whole germ theory thing for people that don't know where this came from or kind of confused. So germ theory, again, is that disease is based on microbes. Now, terrain theory is based on the understanding that it's not the microbes that cause disease, it's the internal terrain that feeds and propagates invasive organisms or opportunistic organisms. That's the proper term, by the way, for what we would term negative microbes, because you have beneficial bacteria, negative bacteria, right? So negative bacteria would be opportunistic, which paradoxically you actually need at a certain proportion to the good bacteria for a healthy inner ecosystem, right? So it's not black or white. It's not, okay, we got to kill those off. They have their own thing going on. They have their own little inner civilization colony going on. We don't need to get in the way of that. We don't need to understand that. That's completely irrelevant. What we need to understand is that if there is a disease or a sickness or something of that case, it's a terrain modification issue. So when you're changing your diet, for example, that's an attempt to change the inner terrain, right? And what is at the root of the inner terrain? The gateway of it is your immune system. Mm-hmm. So building up the immune system is really how you modify the inner terrain, changing out the fuel supply and what you're putting in your body and how effectively you're eliminating the things that should not be in your body, i.e. cleansing, detoxification, and being in that catabolic anabolic cycle. That's really upgrading the terrain. And if you upgrade the terrain and stop feeding these invasive organisms, then they will die off. They will be metabolized into something usable by the beneficial bacteria, because that's also what beneficial bacteria do too, is that they gobble up the debris. Candida in your body gobbles up debris. Parasites, the reason people have parasite infections, well, there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons people have parasite infections is because those parasites are actually protecting you from the endotoxins that are being produced in your body from what God knows whatever's going on. Just the debris that your body can't, your liver and your body can't effectively digest and eliminate. These invasive organisms are basically feeding on the garbage. So if we stop putting garbage in our body and effectively eliminate it, we will not have an inner terrain that's hospitable to these organisms.
Right.
That's the idea.
So let's let's dive into then this the immune system and kind of what would it look like to go from, say, the regular standard American diet? I'm eating some meat, I've got some cheese on my plate, maybe I'm drinking milk,
vegetables,
don't eat a lot of processed foods and whatever. Like help us understand the immune system in the context of this era when we're focused on that, in relationship to this the optimum diet. Like what can people do to upgrade their diet, improve their immune system, and discard any notion of needing to be afraid of these diseases in the first place? Somebody here said, America is ripe for this virus, taking into account the diet of most Americans.
100%. Yeah,
So
totally.
let's unpack that a bit and kind of find out what changes, what needs to happen, what upgrades need to be in place.
Right. Well, just on that note, why are elderly people more susceptible to this is because the consensus, or I should say the common theme with most elderly people in our Western civilization is that they have weakened immune system. That doesn't have to be the case. That's not like a death sentence. It just is a byproduct of your lifestyle, right? But that just to drive that point even further. And they even say that in the mainstream news. They're like, okay, with the high risk people, the infants, which actually probably have a stronger immune system than most adults actually do, strangely enough. But the elderly in particular, they're at that last straw that broke the camel's back kind of place. So this could actually be for them the straw that breaks the camel's back from that perspective, from the immune system perspective. So I definitely want to warrant that. But it's the same. But ultimately, it's the same thing either way. So I try to simplify this a little bit because this could be a long, drawn out kind of thing.
Sure.
As far as like the standard American diet, it's just a processed food diet, just to simplify the whole thing. We got to get off all the processed food. I don't think it's so much about meat versus no meat. I think it's all about quality. You got to be a qualitarian. So if you're eating factory farmed, pesticide laden, antibioticized, hormonally injected, vaccinated meat, grain fed meat, then you're going to actually, you probably are taking in viruses. You probably are taking in some form of mycotoxins so infested meat. Like that's kind of disgusting, but that's the reality of that, right? In these feedlots and all this kind of thing. So you got to upgrade that. You got to get into like grass-fed or grass-fed, grass-finished meat and that kind of thing. Getting into organic. Basically, the idea is you got to get off all inorganic processed foods and you got to get into organic. So if you're not there yet, highly recommend you just get all the way over to organic. And obviously, you want to be consuming more high water-rich fruits and vegetables. But again, it's got to be organic because if not, it most likely has some form of pesticide chemicals laden within it. That's absolutely key. So part of what ruins our immune system is these petrochemicals and and we got to get, so anyways, we got to get off that as a first step. Second step is we got to upgrade our water quality, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. If you are on tap water, you got to get, at least you got to either get a good supply of filtered water, whether it's reverse osmosis, it's distilled water. With those kind of things, I recommend remineralizing it with Himalayan rock salt in particular. If you can get on spring water, like I've been on spring water for, a good 10 years plus, and there are companies that actually deliver spring water to your door. My friend Makunde owns a company called livespringwater.com, and they deliver incredible living spring water directly to your house. They have restrictions in certain parts of the US, but California, they deliver all over there, and in a few other states. Livespringwater.com is worth looking into. Mountain Valley Spring is a great company that you can find their water pretty much in any Whole Foods or Sprouts or anything like that. And these are just ideas to start making the upgrade. I definitely think everybody should have a filter system in their house. Or you need to be getting filtered water or spring water into your house. Changing your water supply will change your life. It will change everything. So that's essential. Then moving on from there, without getting too complicated with the food thing, because that can look like a lot of different things. There's a few key things that you can do to really empower your immune system. One of them is getting into tonic herbs, particularly medicinal mushrooms. So this is where you start to actually reprogram the immune system. So medicinal mushrooms such as reishi mushroom, chaga mushroom, turkey tail mushroom, cordyceps mushroom. You can find a lot of great companies. Four Sigmatic, F-O-U-R, Sigmatic is one of the most popular companies, and you can either order from their website or go to whatever your again, Whole Foods or one of these health food stores, and it's easy to make like a quick tea out of it. I would recommend pounding that stuff down, like always having like either chaga or reishi tea available to you, and just having that throughout the day. Is what those medicinal mushrooms actually do is they reprogram your white blood cells and the intelligence of your immune system. That's what they actually do in layman's terms. They upgrade the intelligence of your immune system. And so when the immune system gets weak, it loses its resiliency. It loses its ability to effectively respond to a foreign organism, like we talked about, or some kind of assault onto the body. So the immune system is always tracking threat detections. It's always on threat detection, tracking different threats to your health. And so those things are really great for upgrading your immunity and getting your immunological resilience back on check. Other things that you can do are, just basic lifestyle things like breathing, like deep breath work. For example, what I tell people to do in the morning, when you wake up in the morning, before you go on your computer or your device, close your eyes and take 10 deep diaphragmatic breaths. So doing that in a cycle of 10. If you don't want to meditate or you're not into meditation, let that be your meditation. Be present for 10 deep diaphragmatic breaths, and that will start to self-regulate not only your stress response, but it'll self-regulate your immune system response and oxygenate your system. That's one of the keys, is getting more oxygen into the system. And if somebody did have an infection of some sort or another, before I went to some kind of pharmaceutical pill or definitely some kind of vaccine that's loaded with unbelievable amount of chemicals and poisons in it, and we know that for sure, the CDC admits half of it, and we know for sure that these things are not just some kind of innocuous whatever, antiviral. These things are loaded with poisons, which, you know, we don't even need to get into at this
You
point.
just read the label, you can see what's in it. It's disgusting. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So
Ronnie, I
before
thought you were going to say innocuous inoculation.
inoculation, yeah. Well, that's what they want to tell you. That's what they want to. That's what they want you to believe.
Yeah.
But so anyways, ozone therapy is what I would do. Ozone therapy before I did any of this other stuff, right? That's a natural vaccine that's been used for a long time, and that in of itself is a whole conversation. But just looking into that would be helpful if somebody is concerned about their immune system, is concerned about an infection, or maybe has some form of infection. Then doing that. What else do you do? Vitamin C, right? And vitamin C, it's not just like, oh, let me just have an orange once in a while. It's like, if you really want to protect your immune system. By the way, vitamin C is antiviral, right? It's antiviral, and it also builds the skin tissue, collagen, all that stuff that we know about. And there's different types of vitamin C that are going to be helpful. There's liposomal vitamin C, which is a fat delivery form of vitamin C that is extremely potent, right? So you can, there's just look up liposomal vitamin C. It comes in these little packets, and it's in this kind of, it doesn't really taste that great, but it's fine. You could like mix it with water if you want, or just take it in. It's like this little gooey substance, and that is extremely powerful. And then there's just nutrition, all of your citrus fruits, apple, or not apple juice, but orange juice, fresh squeezed orange juice, raw, unpasteurized, lemons, limes, grapefruit, that kind of thing. Wild berries, all the berries, getting as many colors into your diet is very, very important. Antioxidants are pigments of color. So the more colorful you have your fruits and vegetables, then the more antioxidants you have, that are the things that actually that are the free that they oppose free scavengers, which basically just means oxidation. That's the thing that starts to slowly break down the immune system, right? Or inflammation, we could just call it. And these are all just basic things. These are things we've all heard about, but maybe we forgot because we got caught up in the media magic trick, and we forgot what we already knew. And then the last thing I'll say about this before I get off is vitamin D. Vitamin D is the most powerful antioxidant. Vitamin D is actually a hormone, and it's critical for all of your hormonal functions. So if your hormones are functioning optimally, your immune system is going to function optimally, right? In fear, stress, that response actually lowers your anabolic hormones, and it can make you more estrogenic, which high amounts of the wrong kind of estrogen are correlated with many forms of cancer, for example. So we got to be aware of that. The stress response is key. Vitamin D turns on more epigenetic triggers in the body than anything else that's ever been shown. And basically what that means is it protects you. And what are the best sources of vitamin D? Right now, if you can't get a lot of sun exposure, or you're sensitive to the sun for whatever reason, I would take a high quality natural vitamin D3 supplement, and up to 10,000 IUs is the effective recommendation. 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 every single day, and or getting a lot of sun exposure. That's what I do. Whenever it's sunny, I go on a hike, I take off my shirt. When I get home, I'm not in a rush to get home and take a scrub myself with like sanitizing soaps or anything. But actually just let myself kind of like be a human being, be a natural human being. And I think those are some really solid recommendations. There's a lot of other things, but I don't want to oversaturate people.
I think that was great, Ronnie. It was really, really good, strong primer. And I definitely want to pivot to some of the pulling the curtain, since you've brought that. I wanted to say to you, like, just as a personal thank you, I remember having a conversation with you about a year ago, talking about how we were kind of like mediocre vegans, and like you really like motivated me. These days we're like, we start with a giant citrus juice of mixed citruses, and we like have fruit throughout the day, and we have some like cooked veggies at night, but we're like, so much closer to like eating a natural diet. Anyway, you know, we were kind of a little bit like mediocre vegan. So thanks to your help and Alex Cousins, we've come a long way.
Sure thing.
But thanks for all that. That was really, really great. I wanted to ask, so you brought up a few things like weapon of, you know, a bioterror weapon and also like the agenda going on. So maybe we can talk a little bit about if this is man-made, and maybe you can talk a little bit about why you've the research you've been uncovering, why you've had that theory. Like if this is man-made, you know, what's the agenda, and like what are they trying to keep us from or take away from us? Maybe we can get to like a higher perspective too here. Like what's the agenda here?
Okay. So what I believe is happening on a bigger picture is there is a mass awakening that's taking place. And I believe every attempt is being taken to suppress that. And that's always been the agenda. That's been the agenda from day one. If you see, one of the challenges with all this is that most people don't know their history. We've just been fed a watered down, falsified, fractionated version of history that's been delivered to us by the victors, right? And that's how it always is. But if you actually update yourself on the true history, particularly in the Western world, starting way back, you know, around even like when the Great Depression hit and what that was all about and how that was actually manufactured, no doubt about that. The Federal Reserve was implemented on the tail end of the Titanic going down, and the 3 billionaires that were opposing the Federal Reserve happened to be on the Titanic as well. So, you know, just go back over that, look into that, you know, and then all the other atrocities that have taken place, the World War I, World War II, those were not, those were manufactured and funded on both ends of the, most people kind of know that, but a lot of people have forgotten because we're caught up in all this nonsense. So we forgot what actually, like the chessboard and the, you know, the domino effect that's been occurring in our world and just in this country since the Industrial Revolution, I would say. And so, you know, and going through like JFK and the assassination and like, so why I'm even bringing into this up is that these are all actually a sequence of events that are also very relevant to what's happening right now. This is all interrelated, and it's all coming to a head, in my opinion. I believe that this is the final frontier of this entire holy charade that humanity has been under for all this time. And I believe what's being taken away from us is, on the surface, it's our civil liberties. It's our rights to choose when to go out, where to go, whom I want to be around. This idea of social isolation, you know, separating myself from other people, creating fear, distancing, being worried that if I hug someone I love, or my grandmother who's dying and I can't even see, like there's a lot of this stuff being embedded here in the psyche of humanity to cause us to be afraid of one another, because ultimately a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. And so if you notice, the media for the most part is constantly propagating and projecting division and separation and us versus them tactics. You see this. I'm not really a political person, but I've started to just pay attention to it. I thought the whole political thing was a complete show and it had no relevance on anything. And now I realize, like, okay, this thing's been playing out just from the corruption and the collusion, you know, from the entire the Bush administration, from Bush Senior, and Bush Jr. obviously is like the worst ever. The Clinton administration and the known criminal activities, you know, that somehow has never come to justice for reasons that now I believe I can see why. But I do believe it is happening. I do believe that that's all coming up. Obama and that whole thing. Again, this is not about political affiliation. This is about something much bigger. These individuals are just sock puppets. They're just, you know, and that's how I recommend people look at this, is these are just sock puppets of a much more profound phenomenon that's taking place,
Mhm.
which is the awakening of consciousness. And right now, when I look at the media, for example, one of the themes that I keep seeing is like this idea of like defeat Trump, defeat Trump. It's all about defeating Trump, like our current president. And it's like, okay, well, what about the American people? Aren't we under some kind of crisis or pandemic? Why is the entire narrative focalized on that? Right. And that's when I started really looking a lot deeper and looking into alternative researchers like Sasha Stone, who I think is just absolutely brilliant and puts a
Yeah.
lot of these puzzle pieces together in total clarity for people. There's many other people. And again, this isn't about Trump or any, this is a much deeper thing. However, I do feel like there's a complete restructuring and reorganizationing in the system, and you could just, all you have to do is just look at a few things that have taken place, like the Treasury gaining complete control over the Federal Reserve. Right. That's monumental. The Trump administration and his Surgeon General completely shutting down this mass vaccination push by Bill Gates, who I think most people are becoming well aware of is just like a sociopath extraordinaire,
And while you're talking about Trump, Ronnie, talk a little bit about QAnon, if you've looked at that.
Yeah.
Is that, do you believe that that's the case, or is this just another kind of distraction? I have kind of done a lot of exploring there, and haven't yet sort of seen a solid proof that says, yes, this is real. I see a lot of people excited and believing in it.
Yep.
But it almost feels like it's, if you're a pro-Trump person and you're kind of awake, it's kind of like veering you into some other potential disinformation campaign. But I'm interested in what you say, because I haven't gone maybe as deeply as you have.
Yeah, that's great. And by the way, I'm not pro this person or that person or anti that person. I'm anti falsehood. And it does appear to me, if we've ever seen it in a president before, Trump is displaying an incredible, first of all, I've never seen somebody who can take 1,000 poison darts all at the same time and be completely unaffected. It's almost like he takes it and is more empowered by it and is creating a disruption in the media's whole, like their whole narrative, like completely just breaking that apart. So I think there's something happening there, and I definitely think he is far more intelligent than people think, and that's a topic in of itself, and we can leave that wherever it stands. The QAnon thing, I don't know. I'm actually, so I've looked into it pretty extensively. I have a strong gut feeling about it. There's other researchers that are definitely convinced by it, and that supposedly are getting insider information from that organization. What I do believe, and I think there's plenty of evidence for this, is that there is a counter coup operation that has been going on and is currently taking massive steps to regain and reclaim control over our system, really, the political system, and what the idea behind all of this is that it's a faction of the government, or a faction of the military complex that, as we get this idea that the military is evil and all these people are evil. I know plenty of people that are and have been in the military, and they're incredible human beings. And they were going out to war with the assumption that we were under war, and we needed to protect our civil liberties. We needed to protect our country from terrorists, right? And then we come to find out that the real terrorists are actually on the inside. So my feeling on it is that, whether it's QAnon or not, I don't know, but I do believe that idea is definitely legitimate. Like it's not, I don't have like evidence that I'm just going to give you. A lot of things have been pieced together. It's a gut feeling though. You know, even just the examples that I pointed out with the shift of the Federal Reserve and because otherwise, if that wasn't the case, we would be in some kind of weird Orwellian reality. Every mandatory vaccinations would have already taken place many years ago. Hillary Clinton, her whole craziness would have been reigning supreme. The whole Trump administration, if you just look at it with innocent perception, not even any political affiliation, but if you look at it with innocent perception, why is the entire Democratic, the whole left wing, why are they so obsessively focused with defeating Trump? Like that in of itself just tells me like where the truth lies, where the truth and lies. And that's the best I got for you, because I don't want to overstretch, and I don't want to assume that I know the truth. A lot of this is just my primal gut instinct. And on that note, I think that is the best barometer to discern between truth and falsehood. It's not just about facts, because everybody is like, well, where are the facts? Where are the facts? Well, you know, we could get into that and we could talk deeper about that in the whole thing around human trafficking and child trafficking, which, by the way, we know is real. Yeah. We've always known this is real. This is not a secret. And now we're starting to find out that that may actually be the underpinning of every other thing on the surface that's taking place. So you asked me before, like, what are they trying to do? I just think it's what they've always been trying to do, which is just control the narrative, control the population, divide people, right? Get people pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine. It's like we shouldn't be on either one of those. We just need to be looking at the situation with clarity. And when you can see something for what it is, then it's not like, oh, I'm on the right or the left. I'm right here in the middle. I'm just looking right at the thing. Yep. And that also has to do with getting out of just being totally logical, right? Because there's a lot of these so-called scientists and stuff, they're coming out with this like intellectualism and like, oh, they're so smart and they have all this credibility and all this. But then you find out that Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, is potentially in bed with George Soros and Bill Gates. So it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, that you know, it's just like at some point, the common sense starts to kick in.
And that's true, Ronnie, of all the major health institutions, isn't it? I mean,
totally,
like
they're
all fed by the high money influences and industry and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
look at their ties.
Yeah. We know how to reverse heart disease.
Yeah.
We know how to reverse all forms of cancer without exception. We know how to reverse diabetes. I would say we probably even know how to reverse diabetes type 1, most likely. But the narrative is so strong that these are incurable conditions. It has nothing to do with what you eat. It has nothing to do with your lifestyle. It's genetic. It's hereditary. It's just this victim attitude, and that's really what the agenda is to keep people as victims in this victim psychology. And you can see that with people when they have these knee-jerk reactions, like, oh no, like you're a conspiracy theorist, or no, like you're just paranoid. And yet I'm paranoid, but you're going to the grocery store with this whole spacesuit getup, and I'm the one who's paranoid.
We've been seeing there's some amazing creativity out there. People go to like Darth Vader. I saw a picture of a guy with a computer monitor over his head. He just had put his head up in an old CRT, you know, like an old Apple IIe computer monitor.
Unbelievable.
One thing is, yes, this is sort of like when you begin to kind of look behind the curtain, it becomes a game of connect the dots.
That's it.
It's not like here's what's happening. You know, it's not like somebody sitting there with a ready-made presentation, ready to kind of tell you exactly all the details of when and where.
Yeah.
With some clear timeline issues, because we didn't get our
yeah.
But we'll deal with that.
I was waiting for that. I was like waiting for like a week and a half every day. I'm like, is today the day? Like, let's get on with this thing already.
but it's a game of it's a game of connect the dots, which means like you sort of see something here, and then that leads you here, and then that leads you here and here, and suddenly a picture begins to kind of come into focus.
Right.
That is very, very different than the one that's being kind of shared on the media.
You're 100% right. That's the perfect, because I'm well aware right now, this is not the normal interview for me. This is actually the first live interview that I've done on this topic. I've shared a lot of information, but I haven't gone deep into like sharing the nooks and crannies of like the coronavirus and like all these things. There's people doing that. There's people more qualified and more interested in that are doing that. I'm just like you. I'm piecing things together, and I'm trying to present a perspective that feels more complete than the fragmented articles you're getting on Facebook or these. I mean, that might be outdated. Some of these are like 2 years old, that I've seen, and they're all kind of like doom and gloom. And it's like military lockdown and military law and all this. One thing I just want to say real quick for everyone is that the one thing I don't buy into is the fear propaganda. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. I am incredibly enthusiastic and optimistic about all of this. I think that this is a spiritual awakening, and everything else is just the muck in the fish tank that's coming up to the surface. And the power brokers, it's like when you have a parasite cleanse and you're doing all these parasite killing herbs, and it's just the analogy we drew before. When you're on the brink of healing, it might feel like the brink of not destruction, but it might feel like you're on the edge of your threshold.
You might feel a lot worse.
That's right. You might feel a lot worse because that organism is secreting chemicals that are misdirecting the immune system. In other words, it's pulling out all of its tricks because it knows it has no leg to stand on. It knows it's about to be eliminated. So that's what a parasite does. That's what it's not logical. It's just a parasite could be related to a psychopath like that. If you want to look at psychologically, one of the challenges people have with this kind of information is that they assume that everybody else has the same moral character and ethical framework that they do. And they don't understand that there are a fraction of the population that don't have empathy. They're not burdened by a conscience or human emotion. Like there are people that actually are legitimately archetypally villains. And that's what a psychopath is, or a sociopath. They don't have empathy. They literally don't care about other people. And there's people that are pathological liars. It's a small, tiny percentage. Most people are good at the core, but that can also be our detriment because we have emotions, we have a conscience, we have empathy, we have compassion, and all these things. But that can be that's the confusing part for people when it comes to this information, and just understanding that there is a duality happening. And ultimately, it's really just for the average person. It's not about like projecting fear. And none of this is about fear. It's actually about empowerment. It's about empowering yourself with enough of what feels like the truth so you can actually get on with your life. Mm-hmm. And you can get your priorities together, right? For me, this has just been helpful for reprioritizing what's actually important, because maybe we got caught off in some of these illusions and marketing and consumerism and these distractions while these other beings ran amok and were toying with us and manipulating us through marketing and consumerism and processed food and everything else.
Yeah, we're getting a few questions here. I'm trying to think. I'd definitely love to hear your quick perspective on 5G. We saw a picture this morning from friends in California. Suddenly there are like 5G what do you call them, transmitters or
Yep.
apparatus are just suddenly
Mhm.
showing up all over Oceanside and Vista during all this. I know that we've looked at that as a potential kind of part of what's actually appearing physically is not so much potentially a virus, but it's more the effect of this technology rolling out, which is
Right.
a theory. I have
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people talking about
Yeah.
that, and that some of the symptoms people are having mirror kind of radiation sickness, which
Radiation sickness, right?
parallel with that.
Mhm.
Um, Somebody asked if this was tailor made just for the U.S. or that if this is a worldwide thing. We're talking about something that takes place worldwide here. This is not
That's
a
right.
United States thing.
Yeah.
This transcends the U.S. government, the Italian government, the Australian government, the Japanese government. This is a worldwide kind of thing, run by people whom we can guess as to who they are, but this is sort of an elite class of individuals who have likely kind of had their hand up the sock for a little while. This is
Yeah.
not something that's just happened since the last 5 to 10 years, but clearly long term.
Mhm.
But so I'm addressing a few of those questions. But to the 5G point, I think you've probably looked into that. And after we deal with this, we have a few kind of final questions to
Sure.
ask.
Sure.
Let's hear your take on the 5G.
I'll just keep it short and sweet. So when I first saw this whole thing unrolling out, the first thing that I became aware of is that it appeared that while we were being encouraged and also paid off to stay in our home, if anyone hasn't gotten that, we're literally being paid to stay in our home. That's very strange. With a potential tax repercussion. And by the way, let me just caveat this real quick. I believe that there's a massive restructuring going on. I've said that before, but I just want to say that again. I think we are most likely entering into a reality where we actually have the society that we've deserved all along, which may include the revocation of income tax, which is not actually legal anyways, apparently. Right? This is a new reality. I mean, I've always known that, but listening to Sasha Stone, there's like, yeah, I realized like, oh, wait a minute, like this is like a involuntary or unconscious contract that I'm making. And, but anyways, that point aside, I want to make that point, as I mentioned, this whole, like, we're being paid to stay in our home, which when people realize that, it's like, oh, wow, okay, that's a little interesting. But so on that point with the 5G, I just noticed that it appeared to me that these vans were showing up all around schools, and they were starting to install this 5G technology. We've known for many years that this is a technology that's been promoted. It's been talked about. It was going to enhance our lives. It's going to make the internet faster. What 5G actually is, it's a military technology for surveillance, for data consolidation, and it's also been weaponized. Now, what's important to understand about that, and this is where a lot of people will go down the doom and gloom, and it's easy to go down it when you understand this. It's like, wow, this is the because like with Elon Musk and like putting all these satellites around the world, the idea is to bathe the biosphere planet in the Wi-Fi. That's the idea. That's the plan. So what I'm telling you, I'm not telling you this is happening or it's going to happen. What I'm articulating is a simplification of an overall distinction. Understand, we need what the plan is or was, so we can wrap our head around this. Now, what I actually believe is happening, and again, this is just my opinion, my perspective. I could be totally Looney Tunes here. I could be totally like, trying to downplay this. But what I do believe is happening is that with the weaponization of 5G, there's also technology to turn those weaponized frequencies into a benign frequency, meaning that it doesn't have adverse effects on biological life. I do believe that Donald Trump knows about this. I do believe the ushering into the policies around 5G is an unavoidable thing, and just based on how widespread, you're talking about like an unbelievable amount of consensus and contracts in the telecom industry and everything. It's not like you just like you can't go along with that. This is something that's been in the works. However, it does. I've heard, and I do believe this, and this is from like sources in the prior in the CIA and the military, that there is technology that's used to actually render those frequencies benign, right? So that's an important thing for people to understand. I don't know what's going on with that, by the way. I don't know. This is a big thing. This is out of my jurisdiction. That's like the best I actually have for you on this, because we don't know what the next plays are. Kind of where we are right now with all of this is we're in a play-by-play, moment-by-moment observation, and all the information that we're getting is downstream. We're not on the we're not even on the chessboard in terms of the moves that are being made. So I have incredible faith, and I also have enough of what I believe to be evidence backed up to assume that those on the chessboard, whether it's QAnon or it's something like that, whatever that is, they're well aware of all this, way ahead of any of us. We're just getting like a little bit of information here and trying to piece it together. But yeah, and we could go deeper into 5G. I'm trying to just kind of present a little bit of information without going too much deeper, because it is alarming. It is extremely concerning for sure. I don't want to minimize that fact of it. Like, these technologies are they're potentially extraordinarily dangerous. However, there are mitigations to it, and understanding the compounds and chemicals into our body, particularly glyphosate, medically modified insecticide from Monsanto's Roundup Ready, which is in the majority of processed foods and inorganic foods, and the introduction of aluminum, which is a heavy metal that's found in all vaccines as far as I know, not mercury or aerosol as they try to call it, but aluminum and glyphosate pair together and drive, the glyphosate, I believe, drives the aluminum past the blood-brain barrier, and the aluminum becomes an antenna for these frequencies. So there is some kind of mind control component. There is some destabilization of the human nervous and autonomy over your own consciousness. Again, that's the overarching idea or plan. And so that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to be scared. What I am saying is you need to detox your body. You need to do heavy metal cleansing. You need to do glyphosate cleansing. You need to clean up your digestive system. You've got to clean up your diet. You've got a lymphatic system, movement, rebounding, infrared saunas, that kind of thing, flushing with the right kind of water, all that's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's great. No, it is. Like you said, Ronnie, it's empowering, right? It doesn't have to be, I think it's really important. And we were sharing about this yesterday. I want to turn to this a little bit now, that like you can, and you were saying this too, that you can see all this and get really doom and gloom and get really hopeless and think like the world's going to end, right? Or you can have a very hopeful view of this is actually about awakening. And this is actually about the last gasp of a system and a series of people behind the curtain who have been there for years and years and years and now they're trying to tighten their grip and gasp it out. So maybe you could talk a little bit as we wind down here about, you were talking about how this is really about a restructuring and possibly we will see the society we all deserve to see. Maybe you can talk a little bit for people who may be in that, feeling a little hopeless or getting in that dark space about like, what do you see coming? Like what's the potential in this?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, my guess is just as good as anybody's. What I see potentially coming, well, first of all, this isn't going to happen overnight. That this is, I do believe that there's going to be phases of this situation. What appears to be happening is that there is there is a tremendous amount of mass arrests that are taking place. I do find that there's evidence for this. The rescuing of human trafficking and child trafficking victims. Donald Trump has alluded to this in one of his press conferences a little while, actually, in multiple of them. He's actually alluded to this and mentioned this in less than obvious ways. And then that's extremely encouraging, right? That's very helpful. There's a lot of things coming out of Hollywood, which is just like, you know, it's the level of corruption and craziness that's gone on there for so long. Not just Harvey Weinstein, that was just, he's just a sock puppet. Like he's a lower consequence kind of just pig of a human, but not really like in the same category as some of these other characters that, you know, there's supposedly 580,000 sealed indictments for arrests around the world. There was 37,000 military troops that were sent into Europe last month or something to that extent. Like these are things that are happening, that are documented. The moves that are being made and when they're being made and how they're being made, I don't know. But there is evidence for these things taking place. So I think we just have to really tune into our own internal guidance system, you know, our primal instinct, get out of our head, get out of the fear knee-jerk response and get into our heart and get into our guttural intelligence and then find the truth right there. Feel into the truth as you listen to this information, feel into the truth within you and how, and what can you do, right? That's the question. What can I do as an individual? Well, the best thing that you can do is really clean up the indiscretions in your own life, right? Take care of your health, take care of your family. Every individual on the ground is responsible for themselves. And no matter what happens with the government, with the potential restructuring and reshifting of the systems as they were, that doesn't change personal responsibility. There's a lot of people are like, oh, you know, the QAnon thing, they want to believe it because it's going to save them, right? There's still people in that savior mentality, which is another form of just being a victim, right? It's like, oh, well, you know, it's, they buy into it on blind faith because their bias is like, I'm going to be saved. Before, as the aliens were going to save me, the ETs were going to save me. It's like, okay, well, I don't know what's happening with that, but now Trump's going to save me. And the white hats behind the scenes are going to save me. It's like, we still have to save ourselves. But the more that each individual does this work, then there's no opposition that's going to stand in the way of a house that's no longer divided. And we as a collective are the house, right? We are the actual house. And so that's really my message with all of this is like, take it for whatever it's worth, whatever's relevant for you, but don't allow any of this to take you out of your center. Don't let it, and you're going to get a little weirded out at some points in the journey, but take it back to the breath. Breathe into your gut, breathe into like that place inside of you that knows pure truth more than just your mind.
That's great, Ronnie. That's actually, it's almost like you read my mind with the last question, because I actually was going to ask about what we can do, because we know that we are creating this reality and that this is actually all a reflection, right, of the shadows of our collective, and that this is coming forth
absolutely
to upgrade us as a whole. And it's an opportunity, really. So that is what I was going to ask us, was just like, what can we each do to choose the highest reality? And I think you were getting into it there anyway, but you've given a lot of really good advice. And I think that like the focusing on ourselves first, it can seem counterintuitive when we want the world to change, but actually it absolutely begins right here to change our reality, right?
Totally, 100%. Yeah, it's still that same, it's the same old thing, right? It's the same old thing. It hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well, Ronnie, we're only at an hour and 40 minutes. So,
oh man, wow, we went deep into it.
And I think Elon's 5G satellite over Sedona's got a little cloud cover because your audio is good, but the visual's a little in or out. But anyway, it's time to wrap up. I guess before we say goodbye, why don't you just let people know kind of what you're up to, what you're working on, how they can interface with you, how they can connect with you, work with you, whatever it is that you're dealing with right now, share with us.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I'll just share a few things here. So there's a lot of different resources you can plug into with me and my work. I have a podcast, which you can just go on iTunes, type in my name, and there's hundreds of episodes at this point, and putting out a lot of new interviews with other thought leaders on their perspectives around all of this. And you can follow me on Facebook. That's where I'm most public right now. And for anybody that really wants to empower themselves and take this time in quarantine and maximize, that's the thing, you got to maximize the time and energy that you have right now. Don't waste it. Don't, even with all these ideas, like, don't spend too much time going down these rabbit holes. Get what you need, put your own perspective together, focus on your own life. And so I've created some ways that people can continue to empower themselves. I have 2 holistic nutrition online courses. One of them is a holistic nutrition certification program called the Holistic Mastery Program. And then I have a shorter program, which is called it's called the Tonic Herbal Mastery Program. So we talked about like tonic herbs, medicinal mushrooms, all of that is covered in that program. That is a program for, both of those programs are for creating invincible immune systems, and so much more, so much more. And I've decided for the rest of this weekend, for today's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, to offer both of those courses at 70% off. I've never done that before. It's incredible discount. It makes the Health Mastery Program $297, and it makes the Tonic Herbal Mastery Program $89. And you have lifetime access to those programs. So if you want more information, just hit me up on Facebook, send me a message. I'd be happy to send you those links and answer any questions about that. And there's a lot of other things too, but I'll keep it simple, keep it short, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we'll put some links below these interviews so people can kind of go check it out. And just one other thing I'll say about your Facebook is that you're doing regular interviews, kind of like these interviews, where you're talking to people, and they're really, really good. I know you talked to Jason Christoph recently, which was really fascinating. I've seen the little Zoom box pop up under maybe twice a week with you talking to people. So that's if you want to kind of hear from others who are in the space that you've created, then that would be a great way to take advantage of that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ronnie.
Thank you, Ronnie. Appreciate your courage in diving into these topics kind of off the cuff. It's pretty amazing to hear you speak in that way, and how informed but yet how balanced you are about it. And that the focus is really like, hey, let's upgrade. This is an opportunity. We don't need to be afraid. And empowering us with tools to move past all that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. And this is the first time I've like really put a lot of the more conspiratorial, aside from like the vaccines and medical thing, that's not new for me. But getting into these political ideas, that's not something I've ever really talked about. And I'm definitely not the expert, but I've been piecing it together, and my common sense is kicked on very strongly. And I'm definitely not the only ones. I hope it wasn't abrasive. I hope it was well received. And if it was abrasive at all, like, feel into it for yourself where that trigger is, and take it or leave it. But it was a pleasure to be here. And thanks for facilitating this and having me on.
Yeah, these are all perspectives coming
that's all it is.
From a new direction. This is not, again, we didn't peel back the curtain and say, here's the truth, but we're saying, consider this. Consider this.
We already did that.
All right.
We did that.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much.